Lake to the earth. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. May he find peace with the Lord. Amen. Would anyone like to say anything before we move on?
Lake was a great guy and an even better friend.
Meet the Prankster, an incredibly fun raider build that enjoys sneaking up to unsuspecting individuals and placing a live grenade in their pockets. If you have yet to get the Prankster's Return achievement, then playing this build is guaranteed to get it for you. The Prankster has a strength of 7, perception of 4, endurance of 5, a charisma of 9, intelligence 1, agility 2, and luck of 1. The Prankster is a surprisingly strong individual who's always been naturally muscular. A high strength stat will make melee feasible for this character. Perception is at 4, as we won't want it to be too low, as we want to be able to pickpocket fairly easily. Endurance is at 5 simply to keep us alive. The Prankster is fairly tough and is perfectly able to take a hit or two. The Prankster is an incredibly persuasive individual who can talk his way out of pretty much any situation. A charisma of 9 will help you pass any speech check and also gets you to the Wasteland Whisperer perk. A childhood spent playing pranks instead of learning has left the Prankster with a heavily underdeveloped mind. He doesn't think anything through and acts on impulse, similar to an animal. An intelligence of 1 does unfortunately mean this character doesn't level particularly fast, which is probably the biggest downside of this build. For the most part, this won't be a huge problem, as there's plenty of ways to get XP boost within Fallout 4. Agility is at 2, simply to grant us access to the sneak perk once we get the bobblehead. Obviously this means you won't be too stealthy early on, so I would suggest getting the agility bobblehead as soon as you can, so you can start using stealth melee effectively. Before this you will have access to commando, so don't be afraid to use automatic guns while being sneaky doesn't work too well. The Prankster isn't a particularly lucky guy. Things don't tend to go his way, and depending on your perspective this may be a good thing. Nevertheless, a luck of 1 represents this. The essential perks of this build are Pickpocket, Sneak and Big Leagues. Pickpocket is the quintessential perk of this build. Although not the most practical or useful perk in the game, it is certainly one of the most fun perks to play around with. As well as robbing everyone you meet blind, you can also utilise Pickpocket as a combat skill. At the second rank you can place live grenades in people's pockets and then just sit back and watch them be helpless to do anything. I'm not completely certain, but this may even be a guaranteed kill, which makes it reasonably powerful despite being a bit difficult to pull off. Fortunately, you will have Sneak to help you succeed in your mischievous activities. In addition, the Sneak perk will help you out in combat to get sneak attacks easier. Big Leagues will be essential for this build as you will primarily use melee. The recommended perks for this build are Commando, Wasteland Whisperer, Armourer, Blacksmith, Demolition Expert and either Life Giver or Endurance Training. Commando gives you a more viable secondary weapon skill, and one of the weapons you will be using is a very powerful automatic rifle. Wasteland Whisperer is a pretty fun perk that also gives you a way to deal with plenty of powerful enemies without having to empty a few mags and wet your blade with blood. It also shows the Prankster to be an animal friendly guy, who has a talent at getting creatures on his side. Armourer and Blacksmith are simply here as they let you improve your gear. Demolition Expert will make your explosives far more powerful, meaning that even if you can't stick a grenade in someone's pocket, you can still throw it at them. Life Giver and Endurance Training are just here to beef up the character a bit, and which one you choose is up to you. I found the character was just a little bit too squishy when fighting tougher enemies, and this little health boost was just enough to tip things back in your favour. There are 3 role-playing perks for this build: Locksmith, Animal Friend and Aqua Boy. Locksmith helps to show the sneaky, backhanded nature of this build, and it's generally just a handy perk to have, especially in the Nuka World DLC. Animal Friend is far, far worse than Wasteland Whisperer, but does have a few uses. The main one arguably being letting you fill your raider settlement with friendly deathclaws to defend the place. If you don't know about this yet, then check out what the Wasteland Workshop DLC added, primarily the cages and the beta wave emitter. I felt that Aqua Boy helped make the build feel a bit more like a Joker, and also can help you with your stealth. The Prankster was, as the name suggests, quite the practical joker throughout his life. Back when he was in school, instead of studying and working hard, he would spend his time thinking up pranks to play on people and acting on these ideas. These pranks weren't always particularly impressive or funny, some of which were even quite cruel, including one time where he set up a rigged BB gun in a cupboard in his classroom but ended up blinding his teacher in one eye. Somehow the prankster was able to talk his way out of being blamed for that, even though he was the only one in the class who burst out laughing as soon as the teacher opened the door. Throughout all of his school years, he was never punished once for all of the pranks he pulled, no matter how dangerous they were. No matter how much proof there was, he was always able to talk his way out of things. His disreputable nature meant that most people never felt comfortable around him, and anyone who did spend time with him saw just how lacking his moral compass was. This led to the prankster spending most of his free time with animals instead of humans. He became quite talented at getting animals on his side, and could even pacify aggressive creatures, a talent that could have been put to good use by someone else, but the prankster only cared about helping himself and having fun, so he let it go to waste. At the end of his school days, the prankster started spending all of his time at home. His family was fairly wealthy, and the prankster didn't need to worry about getting a job to live. However, after one too many pranks at home, his parents told him that he would have to get himself a job immediately or get kicked out of the house. He did end up getting himself a job. He joined up with the military, as it was the first place he found where they seemed eager to have him join. As he was shipped away to start his army training, a mysterious fire burned down his old home with his family inside. Police were able to work out the fire was started by a malfunctioning giddy-up buttercup knocking over some very precariously placed flammable substances placed next to a bunch of candles. The event was put down as a terrible accident, but there were plenty of people who suspected that the prankster was involved somehow. The military was able to find a use for the prankster's lack of value for human life, putting him onto a kill squad that they assembled to wipe out any enemies they faced without hesitation. Although the prankster enjoyed killing people for a while, he started to get bored and began playing pranks on his fellow squadmates. After a short time, he worked out what he thought would be the perfect prank. He discovered that his incredibly violent sergeant was a Nuka Cola addict who hadn't been able to satiate his craving for a long time. The prankster stole as much Nuka Cola as he could get his hands on and stashed it away in one of his squad mates' bags before telling the sergeant that he'd spotted the individual drinking a bottle. Needless to say, the events that took place after this were quite violent and bloody, but somehow the prankster wasn't punished for this, managing to once again talk his way out of the situation. However, he did finally get caught for one of his pranks. He placed a dud grenade in the commanding officer's desk, rigging it to look like the grenade would explode after the drawer was opened. After this event, the prankster was dishonourably discharged from the military, but shortly afterwards, the officer who he had pranked was found with his throat slit wide open, and one of the killed squad had mysteriously disappeared. After leaving the military, the prankster bought himself a house in Sanctuary Hills and married a woman who claimed to have been a lawyer, but who had actually been in the military as part of the same squad as the prankster. He carried on playing pranks on anyone he could for a time, but eventually the war would play the biggest prank of all on him, taking away his wife and son for atomic annihilation, and leaving him all alone again for a time. The prankster is loyal to only one faction, and that is the pack. You'll want to do everything you can to help out the pack, but don't let yourself be talked down to. You're the boss of them, not the other way around. Siding with the pack will guarantee that when you finish the DLC, you will get the Pack Alpha perk, boosting your damage resistance and your melee damage significantly. You don't have any strong affiliations to the main story factions, but feel free to help them out if it seems fun. Dogmeat, Kate, McCready, Hancock and Gage are all acceptable companions for this build. Your companion doesn't need to be evil, but they definitely can't be morally good. Dogmeat works well because he is an animal and has no affinity system, whilst the others are all fairly morally grey, and you shouldn't have too much trouble building affinity with them. Ultimately, your companion doesn't matter too much. The prankster isn't concerned with who is with him, as long as he's having fun, he doesn't care what other people think. For your main weapon, I suggest using a super sledge before Nuka World, and once the DLC begins, try to get Ceto's Shiny Slugger. There's something incredibly fun about getting a sneak attack with rocket-powered weapons. I did end up using Throat Slicer a lot whilst playtesting, and it's certainly a good weapon to grab as a backup for when you want to be more conventionally stealthy. For your ranged weapon, you will want to get yourself the Problem Solver if you can. To get this weapon, you will need to choose every speech option on the right when talking to Mason in Nuka World for the first time. There are a couple of speech checks you need to pass, but with this build that shouldn't be a problem. You will want to kit yourself out with a full suit of pack armour. Make all of the pieces ultralight and improved. Any pack mask is acceptable, but I personally chose the Jaguar helmet just because it was the coolest looking one I had on me. Feel free to just choose whichever you most like the look of. The most important thing is to make yourself stand out by being bright and colourful. Nobody's going to be looking at you if you aren't standing out. The Prankster isn't a power armor build, as he relies more on stealth for combat, but if you need to, then you can always jump into a suit for the tougher fights, or areas where stealth may not work too well. The most important part of playing this build is to have fun. Feel free to enjoy messing about in the Commonwealth without worrying too much about the consequences of what you are doing. Try to kill as many enemies as possible by reverse pickpocketing a grenade. It's really satisfying actually. Other than this, take any opportunity you can to play pranks on people, even if the prank is something as cruel as laying landmines all around and in their bed. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you have great fun playing this build and enjoy a build that does focus more on just having fun in the game than hardcore stats and gear. Make sure to like, subscribe and share this video, and tune in Sunday for the next Fallout 4 build.